Hey there, guys. This is Cole. Welcome to another ranking video. I know it's been close to 2 weeks since I uploaded, but it's just been busy these past few days. But today's ranking video I'm going to be doing is all 5 movies directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. All 5 movies from these directors ranked from worst to best. And I got to say right now, these movie directors here, they are some of the only few movie directors that have not yet made a single bad movie, and they've directed 5 movies together. And the movies in this video I'll be ranking are 21 are Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street, The Lego Movie, and of course, the most recent movie they directed, Project Hail Mary, starring Ryan Gosling. But yeah, like I said, I think these two directors are rather good, and they haven't made a single movie that I've disliked yet. So this was honestly a very difficult list to put together, but anyways, let's get into my ranking. Coming in at number 5 for me is going to be the first movie they directed, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs from 2009. Now again, considering the fact that I put this low, like I said, this was a very difficult list to do because I do really enjoy all 5 of these movies, but I do think that story-wise, this is a really good movie, but story-wise, it is the weakest of these movies and one thing I do think does work really well about this movie is I like the characters and I like the story. And this is one of the best Sony Pictures animated movies where you basically have a guy by the name of Flint Lockwood who basically had a dream as a kid to become a scientist. And, as an adult, he basically invents technology to make it rain from the sky, but instead of raining actual droplets of water, he basically makes it, rain food over, like, hamburgers, pizza, vegetables, and so many other vegetables, basically weather coming out the sky. I do think that is a rather interesting premise. I do think that Flint Lockwood and Sammy are rather good characters. I think that the humor and the animation's pretty good. So yeah, again, like I said, this is the weakest by default. And the sequel to this movie I thought was okay, but it wasn't as good as the first movie. Although, considering the fact that Phil Lord and Chris Miller did not come back to direct the sequel, that probably didn't help. But overall, at the end of the day, this was a pretty good start to their career, and I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. Coming in at number 4 for me is going to be the 2014 movie, The Lego Movie, which I actually did see this movie in theaters when it came out, and this was long before I started YouTube. I saw this movie in theaters for my 11th birthday in 2014, and I absolutely loved this movie. And what I think works so well about this movie is, again, I think that the story and the characters work really well. In fact, I actually do really like the main protagonist of this movie, Emmett, who is voiced by Chris Pratt. And I think he does a rather good job in this movie. Once again, I do think that the animation is rather good in the movie. And I do like the villain of this movie voiced by Will Ferrell. I thought that was interesting that he decided to do a villain type of role. And yeah, this is a movie that I've watched several times. And yeah, of all the Lego movies we've gotten, this is easily the best one. And I know they did a sequel to this movie, which I have not seen, but I heard the sequel wasn't as good as this one. But again, the fact that Phil Lord and Chris Miller did not come back to direct it probably did not help. But overall, I thought that this was an awesome movie 12 years ago, and it still is an awesome movie 12 years ago. And I do like the song in this movie, Everything Is Awesome. I mean, come on, how can anyone not like this song? But yeah, rather good movie. Coming in at number 3 for me, now this might be recency biased, but coming in at number 3 for me is going to be the most recent movie from these directors, and that, of course, is Project Hail Mary, which was released in 2026. And I saw this movie a little over a week ago at the IMAX theater, and then a day after with my girlfriend, and I absolutely loved this movie. What I really like about this movie is how it has an interesting story where it's basically about this type of bacteria that, is basically affecting the sun. And Ryan Gosling ends up playing a scientist who basically has to find a way to save the earth. That way the earth doesn't die in 30 years. And while I will say it's not the most original story in the world, I mean, we've seen these types of movies before, I do think that the movie does do a good job with its character development. And I think this movie blends three genres perfectly. I think this movie is a perfect blend of science fiction, drama, and comedy all rolled into one. And I think it blends those three tones perfectly. And like I said, I do like how this is a more, there are still comedic elements in it, but there are comedic elements in here, but it's much more of like a serious type of movie, which Phil Lord and Chris Miller before this did not direct any drama or really sci-fi movies. But the fact that, they decided, we're going to do a movie based on a very popular book by Andy Weir, the author of The Martian, I applaud them for doing something different. And of the movies that have come out this year so far, which granted, we're not far into the year, but it's easily the best movie we've had all year so far. And I do think that that once again, Ryan Gosling is great as the main character in this movie. And I liked his character's relationship with Rocky. I thought that was pretty, the robot spider alien, which I thought that was rather cool. But yeah, this was a rather nice movie. Coming in at number 2 for me is going to be 22 Jump Street from 2014. Now, it's not quite as good as the first movie, but what I think works so well about this movie is the chemistry between Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill. These two together are absolutely hilarious. I think that the action scenes are very well shot. I think that the comedy works very well in this movie. And again, and it was also nice to see Ice Cube as like the police chief. I thought he was absolutely hilarious in this movie. The only reason this isn't number 1 for me is the fact that this movie the way the movie does end, it does tease a sequel, which we unfortunately never got. And at this rate, who knows if it's going to happen. But other than that, this is a rather good sequel, and I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. But for me, easily, coming in at number 1 is going to be the 2012 comedy movie 21 Jump Street, starring Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill. And what I really like about this movie is how, now, this is actually based on like a TV series that came out in the 1980s, which I've never seen, but from what I've heard, the original is more of like a drama TV series, as to where this one is basically as a comedy. And now, like I said, I've never seen the original show, so I can't, really compare the two. But as a comedy on its own terms, I think this movie is absolutely hilarious. I really like the story to this movie, where you essentially have these two police officers who are in their 20s, but they decide to go undercover as high school students to basically get a crime, to basically bust a guy with drugs and stuff like that. I think that's a rather interesting premise for a comedy. Once again, I think that the action scenes in this movie are very well shot. I think that the comedy is really funny. I especially really like the scene where Jonah Hill, like his character, he's basically inside of a store, and this woman comes by him, and he pushes the woman over because she thinks something is going on, and then he basically lies to the guy who's like selling drugs. He says, she was just trying to grab my dick, dude. And the guy's like, what? Like, that scene, which on pen and paper, it doesn't sound funny, but it works in this movie because it doesn't, like, this movie takes ideas that on pen and paper should not be funny, but the reason it is funny is because of the line delivery and the overall execution of it. And just, yeah, great movie all the way around. I've watched this movie plenty of times with my sister. I've been a big fan of this movie ever since my dad first introduced me and my sister to this a couple years ago, and it is easily the best movie Phil Lord and Chris Miller have directed. So it comes in at number 1, and I'm going to give this a 10 out of 10. Like, this to me is a perfect comedy. Like, I don't have any problems. And another thing I will say, I liked at the end, I liked the part when the bad guy at the end, like, he got his, you-know-what shot off. Like, I thought that scene was funny. But just, yeah, great comedy all the way around, and easily their best movie. So, yeah. Anyways, guys, that was my ranking of all 5 of the movies directed by Lord and Miller, or Phil Lord and Chris Miller. But go ahead, share your ranking in the comment section down below. How would you rank these movies, or at least the ones that you've seen? But yeah. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, we'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye-bye now.